Today, we're going to explore the fascinating and influential world of interest groups. Interest groups are essentially organized collections of individuals who unite around shared interests or concerns with the goal of influencing political decisions or changing public policies. These groups vary greatly in size, purpose, and scope. For instance, in the United States, AARP is a prominent interest group boasting nearly 38 million members who advocate for issues important to Americans age 50 and older, such as health insurance, retirement benefits, and affordable medication. Conversely, smaller groups like the San Francisco Democratic Party, which consists of approximately 250,000 members, focus on engaging and mobilizing local Democratic voters. Interest groups are not unique to the United States. They have global counterparts that also actively shape political landscapes. For example, in the United Kingdom, UK Youth has been lobbying for over a century, supporting youth-oriented programs such as leadership training and health education. In France, La Quadrature du Net advocates fiercely for internet freedom and privacy, successfully influencing major privacy litigation against corporations like Amazon. Broadly speaking, interest groups are categorized into economic and non-economic groups. Economic interest groups focus primarily on financial issues, such as business growth, labor rights, and agricultural policies. Business groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce advocate for business-friendly policies benefiting companies of various sizes. Labor unions, such as the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, represent workers in various sectors, pushing for improved working conditions and wages. Agricultural groups, including Ireland's Irish Farmers Association and America's National Farmers Union, advocate for the interests of farmers. Professional groups, like the American Medical Association, support policies beneficial to healthcare professionals. On the other hand, non-economic or public interest groups tackle broader societal issues such as environmental protection, civil rights, or ideological advocacy. Greenpeace International, with offices around the globe, champions environmental causes. Single-issue groups like the Japan Rice Millers Association advocate exclusively for specific industries. Civil rights groups such as the NLACP in the United States and Canada's Congress of Aboriginal Peoples work tirelessly to protect minority rights. Ideological groups, including the Democratic Socialists of America and Hong Kong's Civil Human Rights Front, push for wide-ranging political changes based on specific philosophical beliefs. Several theories help explain why and how interest groups form. Pluralist theory posits that interest groups arise naturally as diverse interests compete to influence political outcomes. This theory emphasizes collective action and suggests that political power is widely distributed among various competing groups, ensuring diverse representation in public discourse. Disturbance theory, proposed by Columbia University's David Truman, argues that interest groups form in response to significant societal changes or disturbances. These can include shifts in social norms, environmental issues, or technological advancements. For example, changing societal attitudes toward marijuana use have spurred the creation of advocacy groups supporting its legalization. In contrast, transaction theory challenges pluralist ideas by suggesting that political influence primarily reflects the interests of a limited group of elites rather than broad collective actions. Proponents like Robert H. Salisbury and Mancher Olson argue that most individuals prefer to benefit from the work of interest groups without actively participating, creating a free rider problem. To understand interest groups, we need to look deeply into the foundations of an interest group. Imagine you're sitting at a restaurant, enjoying your meal. Your server approaches with a smile, attentive to your needs, ensuring your experience is pleasant. But have you ever thought about their wages? Many restaurant workers in the United States make what is called a subminimum wage, often as low as $2.13 an hour, relying heavily on tips from diners to supplement their income. But tips vary significantly. Sometimes diners don't tip at all, and even when they do, there can be unfair distribution among restaurant staff. Front-of-house staff who interact directly with diners might pool tips, but line cooks and dishwashers often receive little or nothing from these pools. Organizations like One Fair Wage have highlighted these inequalities, emphasizing that the restaurant industry, although rapidly growing, remains among the lowest-paying sectors, disproportionately impacting women and minorities. During the COVID-19 pandemic, these vulnerabilities became starkly evident, and groups like One Fair Wage advocated aggressively for increased protections and fair wages for restaurant workers. Interest groups like One Fair Wage illustrate the significant impact these organizations can have on society. Advocates of interest groups argue that they play a crucial role in a healthy democracy, echoing James Madison's perspective in Federalist Paper No. 10. Madison believed that while factions or interest groups pose potential threats, their competition could enhance democracy by preventing any single interest from dominating the political discourse. Interest groups provide channels for citizen participation, essential for informing political leaders about the public's most pressing concerns. By mobilizing citizens, these groups also foster social capital, building networks and relationships that can help communities address collective problems. For instance, during the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 1980s, activist groups effectively brought attention to an issue initially neglected by the government, forcing political actors to respond and allocate resources. However, interest groups are not without their drawbacks. Although pluralism theoretically ensures that various interests are represented, it can lead to factionalism, where specific, often narrow interests overpower broader public needs. Madison himself cautioned about this risk, highlighting the danger of a small, highly organized group monopolizing political attention at the expense of the majority. Moreover, well-resourced groups, usually representing business and professional interests, tend to dominate, reinforcing economic bias. As political scientist E. E. Schattschneider famously noted, the ideal pluralist system often favors the wealthy and powerful, leaving disadvantaged groups underrepresented because they lack resources to engage effectively. This imbalance is further perpetuated by mechanisms like inside lobbying, where groups cultivate direct relationships within government to influence legislation, policymaking, and even judicial appointments. Interest groups regularly lobby Congress, federal agencies, and the executive branch to advance their interests, crafting legislation, mobilizing constituent support, and influencing policy directions. They also use judicial tactics like filing amicus curiae briefs or lawsuits, exemplified by cases like Sierra Club versus Trump, which challenged executive decisions on the national stage. Outside lobbying, or grassroots lobbying, represents another key tactic where groups rally public opinion to influence political actors indirectly. For example, California's recall effort against Governor Gavin Newsom illustrated the power of grassroots movements. More extreme forms of activism, such as protests by groups like Extinction Rebellion, who dramatically highlight climate issues, also fall under grassroots lobbying. In places like Switzerland, interest groups often employ ballot initiatives to appeal directly to voters, reducing their reliance on direct lobbying of political leaders. Interest groups further influence politics through political action committees, PACs, and super PACs, raising substantial funds to sway election outcomes. PACs have contribution limits and must disclose donors, while super PACs, emerging after the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision in 2010, can raise unlimited amounts and often receive so-called dark money from undisclosed donors, raising concerns about transparency and undue influence. Addressing these concerns involves regulating lobbying activities to ensure fairness and transparency. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 in the United States sought to tighten such regulations, imposing restrictions on lobbying activities and campaign contributions. Further reforms, like President Biden's 2021 executive order, continue these efforts, setting stricter rules around lobbying practices, revolving door employment, and executive incentives. Globally, lobbying regulation varies significantly. The European Transparency Initiative of 2005 sought to increase lobbying transparency within the EU. Yet, critics argue these measures are insufficiently enforced and often inadequate. Countries such as Germany and Poland maintain voluntary lobbyist registration systems, highlighting the ongoing challenge of effectively regulating lobbyists worldwide. Thus, while interest groups undeniably amplify voices and issues in democratic societies, they simultaneously pose challenges related to equity, influence, and transparency, issues that continually invite debate and reform.